Welcome, everybody, to Building with Brick. Our podcast took a little vacation this summer. We took a couple months off. I had some things I really wanted to do on my website and a few opportunities to record some things for another purpose, a training purpose. So we're back today, and I'm really excited with the guest that we have. Richard Konzem is with us. And Richard was my boss for a while. And I'll say this, he was the best boss I ever had. Richard was the senior associate athletic director at KU. And he'll tell us about his life at KU. It was very extensive. I mean, he started basically as a janitor and moved all the way up to the top. And then eventually, when a new regime came in, he was moved over to the Dole Center. And then he fortunately came to Benedictine as our athletic director. And too soon, he moved away from us and went over to Rockhurst, Rockhurst University. But just as a reminder, before we get started on this, I thought I'd share with you just why I have a podcast. I wrote a book, and it's called So You Want to Be a Coach. And it's a document that has why I went from being a corporate executive to a basketball coach, and the story of how that happened, and then was it a good decision or not? And so in order to find out if it was a good decision, you're going to have to read the book. You can get it on Amazon. But after I wrote the book, I thought, well, there's more to it than this. You know, this is just my opinion. And I'd really like to get the opinions of others in the field, especially those who've been very successful, and see what they think about coaching and managing and things like that. So I've had a number of really special guests. And again, today I've got one that is one of my favorites. Richard, welcome. Really nice to have you.
Thanks, Joe. Good to visit with you.
Richard, I don't know how many people, I know you know everybody in Kansas. There's no doubt about that. It's amazing when we travel, you know everybody. But I don't know how many people outside of Kansas know the name Richard Konzem. So you might tell us a little bit about yourself on growing up. I think you grew up in Salina. And, you know, did you play sports, or how'd you get involved in athletics?
Yeah, you bet. I did grow up in Salina in the 60s, a great era and a great place to grow up, and was very fortunate that my parents had come from Beloit, Kansas, a very small farming community, and in north central Kansas, and my grandfather still farmed there. So, yeah, as a kid, I was typical. Our driveway was the basketball driveway, and our backyard was the football field, and the neighbor's backyard was the baseball field, and we did all that. And then at age 12, they asked me to come work on the farm in the summer. So that kind of short-circuited, sports and all that, because, you get up pretty early, and I wouldn't have let my kids do it, but at age 12, they put you on a tractor and you're going around the fields, and at age 14, I'm driving a combine through downtown Beloit and hauling wheat trucks into the grain elevator. And I look now at some of my freshmen on my team, and I think, I wouldn't let you drive a wheat truck, and I was 14 years old doing it. So yeah, I did that, but look, I wouldn't trade it for anything, but it did certainly in the summer short circuit, the sports piece. But I loved sports and really enjoyed it, and was always attracted to it.
I've known you for quite some time, and in your own quiet way, you're really a competitor. You're a winner.
Thanks.
You're a winner.
And I'd tell you, I think that came from my parents and my grandparents and the whole farming background. My dad had a company, and they made ball bearings for farm machinery and equipment. It's a very precise, profession and job. And so there was always a strive for perfection. And when you're farming, the great thing, the great reward I always felt was, at the end of the day, you could look back across the field and you could see what you had accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a visual there, and you tried to drive as straight as you possibly could and plant the rows as straight as you could and not have any skips or anything like that. And there is a mindset and a stick-to-itiveness when you're driving around a field for 14 hours a day at 5 miles an hour. You've really got to, lock in and stay with it and all that. So yeah, I think that probably instilled the competitive nature, and I try to do the competitive nature from a leadership standpoint. I'm not, in this day and age, the trash talker and all that. I wouldn't do that to an opponent or anything. Let your actions speak is kind of my philosophy on that.
Right. Interestingly, I was on the farm when I was little too, and my brother was the one that played your role. They let him drive the tractor for baling hay and things like that, but they were really smart. They never let me get behind the wheel of a tractor. They said, this kid, he has no control. The only time I ever tried it was I went to my uncle's house, who he was within 15 miles of where we were, and he was doing something, I don't know, and he had guys there helping, and we had the tractor in the barn, and his barn was almost like on a hillside. So he had a ramp that you had to be on you had to back your tractor, either back it up or take it up that ramp to get into the barn, etc. So we're up there facing out the door, and they let me sit on a guy's lap, and I'm only like maybe 8 at the time, 8 or 9, sit on his lap, and I'm going to be able to guide it, as we go out and go down that ramp. Well, unbeknownst to the guy behind me, I decided we're going to do this fast, and I grabbed the throttle and pulled it back as far as I could, and the tractor just goes, the wheels come up on the front, and then the guy, fortunately, he reacted very quickly and shut that thing down, and we didn't get hurt or anything, but I was off the tractor immediately.
Yeah.
So my experience on the farm, I wasn't the best farmer in the world. Where did you get involved with KU? I mean, Salina, I don't know how big KU is out there, but usually as you go out west, K-State is the big school, and KU's the evil empire, etc.
You're so right and so accurate. And we were only 60 miles from Manhattan. My first college football game I ever saw was in the late 60s at K-State Stadium with Vince Gibson and Purple Pride and all that stuff. And yeah, I was destined to go to Kansas State. And again, the farm background and all that, kind of the ag school, and it just made all kinds of sense. And I was very fortunate. I did try out for the high school basketball team, because I played junior high football, but my size and all that, and I guess the contact, I knew football wasn't going to be for my future. So I was really interested in trying to be a basketball player. And as a freshman, the coach cut me. And it was devastating. He showed great judgment because I was terrible and wasn't any good. And we had a lot better players. But all my friends were on the team. So I went back to him and I said, hey, could I be your manager? And he took about a week. And finally, I think I pestered him enough. And he said, okay, yeah, you can be the manager. So we were very good. And so my sophomore year, we went to the state tournament, and it was in a Hearn field house at Manhattan at K-State. And the first round, we upset Highland Park. Randy Springs was their coach. Mm-hmm. And the second round, we were big underdogs to Kansas City Sumner. And Sumner had great players, and it averaged about 75 points a game that year. And our coach was a Bobby Knight disciple, passing game. And we had 5-pass rule, and the postman had to touch the pass before a shot went up, all those kind of rules. And we were playing well, and we were ahead by 4 or 5, and there was a loose ball situation. their player goes for it, our guy goes for it, their guy gets a foul. And their coach was a guy named Craig Hall, and he came down in front of our bench in Manhattan, and he got 3 technical fouls. So there's 3+ minutes left in the game, and he's ejected. So all the Sumner fans come down out of the stands and ring the court in Ahern Fieldhouse. And the PA guy asked him to go back to the stands, and their principal comes back, and we would start and stop playing. And we finally get down to 1:16 left in the game. So we have the foul situation, we have the technicals, we make the 5, the free throws, and then inbound the ball and shoot, and they get called for goaltending. So now that lead is expanded to about 13, and it's really riled up the crowd and all that. And Bryce Durbin was the executive director of the Kansas High School Activities Association. He was in attendance at the game. So he came down and said, look, if you don't return to the stands and all that, then we're going to suspend this game. And he did. And we went back to the locker room for 45 minutes, and they cleared the field house, and there were riots outside and bricks through car windshields and all this.
Wow.
And we came back the last minute 16 in front of no one in Ahern Fieldhouse, our AD, our principal, and the media writers in that press box that hung up on the west side of Ahern, clacking on their old manual typewriters, and you could hear the shoes squeaking on the floor. Well, we win. And then the next night we play, well, we win. And then the best part of the story is we go to our hotel, the Best Western, at the end of Bluestem there, or Bluemont there in Manhattan on the east side. And the Wyandotte County cars keep circling the hotel parking lot.
Oh, no.
So the Manhattan police chief comes and knocks on our coach's door and says, we're not sure we can provide for your safety anymore. We think you boys ought to go back to Salina. So at 1 a.m, the day of the state championship game, we got in the vans and we drove back to Salina and spent the night at home. And then the next day came back and we lose to McPherson. Well, that was the first part of the story. Well, the next year we go to the state tournament again, and it's an Allen Fieldhouse at the University of Kansas.
Yeah.
I'd never been on the campus. And I walked in Allen Fieldhouse and I was in awe. I mean, it was so much larger than Ahern, and the campus at KU is as pretty as there is and sits up on the hill. And I pretty much decided right then I'm going to come to KU. And then that summer I was in Boise State and it was at KU, and then that kind of solidified it. So that's how a guy from Salina got to KU. So that experience of being a high school student and being on our campus and seeing it, that philosophy then, when I was at KU working in administration, if we ever had a chance to host a high school event, a tournament, a state tournament, the Kansas Relays, I was all in on that.
Yeah.
Because I knew it was the single event that made the difference in me going to KU, and it was about getting kids on the campus. So that it's a long story, but it was a fun one, and it influenced me for the rest of my career.
That is really interesting. Now, once you enrolled at KU, how'd you get involved in athletic administration?
Okay, well, there's another story, and there's a whole theme in all this. And in sports, you don't win every game, and you get beat and you get knocked down, and it's about getting back up. Well, I already told you I got cut from the basketball team, but I went back to the coach and said, I got to be a part of this. Let me be the manager. So my senior year in high school, I went into the basketball office at KU during my KU visit day and said, I'd like to talk to Coach Owens and talk about becoming the manager. Well, at the time they had one, and now they've got a cast of 12 or so, and they already had amazingly committed to the 2 twins from our arch rival McPherson to be the managers. So I didn't have a job. So the very first day of class, I lived in a fraternity for 1 semester, but the first day of class, one of my fraternity brothers was going to be late to class in the afternoon, and I happened to be there and said, hey, can I get a ride up to campus? So as I drove him up to campus, and as I was at the corner in front of Allen Fieldhouse, my high school track coach had left Salina, had come to KU as a graduate assistant. I saw him on the corner. He yelled at me. He said, hey, where are you living? Because we didn't have cell phones I told him, and he said, we're looking for a manager for the track team. And so then I got a call and to come in and interview, and I'd been the basketball manager. And so I went in and I talked to the assistant track coach, and they were desperate and needed somebody that would come down and do the laundry, And so that's how I got to be the manager. And from that point, then things really took off for the career in college athletics, because our coach was Bob Timmons, and Bob Timmons had been Jim Ryan's coach.
Yeah.
And he had been a long-time coach at Wichita East, and had this kid who made a decision to run cross country rather than to go bowling on Saturday morning, and it was Jim Ryan. And that was the decision Jim had to make. And with Timmy, developed him into the, a world record holder in the mile, and Olympian and all that. Well, Timmy was a guy that was real driven. He was almost tunnel visioned about sports and track and all that stuff. And he took it on that I might be a guy that could be that and have that career. So it was the Kansas Relays my freshman year, and it was the Saturday before. And we were in the track office, and we were doing the mailing to send out to all the high schools with their heat sheets and the times and all that stuff. Because remember, this is way before computers and anything like that. So you did everything manually and by mail.
Yeah.
And it got to be Saturday, evening, and we'd missed the mail drop time at the Lawrence post office. So Coach Timmons said, well, does anybody want to ride into Kansas City? Because he could go to the Kansas City post office downtown and still get the mail out to get it in their hands on Monday. And I was a freshman, and I had no girlfriends and no social life. And so I said, sure, Coach, Saturday night I'll ride in, pick up to Kansas City and to go to the post office, pretty exciting time. So on the way in, Timmy outlined my career path for me. It was a 45-minute ride in a pickup. And he said, here's what you need to do. And here's how I'm going to help you. And here's, if you want to do this in athletic administration, this is it. I mean, I can go back to that single evening, that single incident. And this was a guy who just said, and it was like he had done with Jim Ryan. And so then on the way home, he told me the Jim Ryan story. And Timmy was the guy that, after their meets, when they'd get on the bus, each kid got called up individually to sit beside him in the front seat. And he'd go through their race with them and what they did great, what they needed to improve on, and all that. And that was how Timmy treated me. So from that moment on, I was the manager, I was the assistant coach, I was the director of the relays, I was everything. And that set the path. And then the really nice thing Timmy did was turn me over to the guy who was the current assistant athletic director at the time, and a guy named Jerry Waugh. And Coach Waugh had come from Wellington, Kansas, and he'd played for Fog Allen at KU. And Coach Waugh was always the guy that was a year early. He was on the 1951 KU basketball team and he was the captain and one of the best players. And of course, in 52 is when they won the national championship, went to the Olympics and all that.
Yeah.
Well, Coach Waugh was the assistant AD, and Coach Waugh is the greatest gentleman. And he really helped me in the golf world too. But he took me on the path, and he took me under his wing and did the administrative side. So my whole college career, I was getting a business degree, but it was really, I learned so much more in the field house and in athletics than I ever did in the classroom. And so then by chance found out that you could get a master's degree in sports administration. And at the time, this was 1979, and there were only about 20 programs in the country, and the best program was at Ohio U, but they had one at the University of Southern California. And the Ohio U thing, I went through the process, and they had 300 applicants. They interviewed 100, and then 30 got selected. Well, I got to the interview stage of 100, but then that wasn't going to be until June. And so you were going to find out on the 4th of July whether you got in or not. Well, you'd graduated in May. So we were going to, the track team was going to go have a duel in Oregon, at Eugene, Oregon. Imagine that. Flying out, to have a great track meet, and it was wonderful. Well, I went to Timmy and I said, hey, Coach, could I trade in my airline ticket, leave 2 days early, stop by USC on my way and visit the campus and see about the sports admin program? Absolutely. So I flew out, landed in LA, went to rent a car, didn't have a credit card. I just had, and they said, well, you can't rent a car. I said, well, cash works back in Kansas. I mean, they must have thought I'd fallen right off that turnip truck back here. And they allowed me to rent a car. I gave them like $200 cash and as a deposit, I guess. And they let me rent the car. And I go to USC and I'm touring the campus and I'm paying $360 a semester at KU tuition at the time. I mean, that's how reasonable college was.
Yeah.
And I'm walking around and I said, okay, well, what's it cost to go to school here? And the head of the department turns to me and said, well, $10,000. I said, what? And, well, yeah, this is a private school. Well, I didn't know that. I mean, I'm this kid from Kansas. I thought the University of Southern California, just like the University of Kansas, you know?
Yeah.
I had no idea. And I said, oh, my heart just stuff, everything just completely fell to the ground. I thought, oh my God, what a waste. And they said, hey, wait, because I said, I can't afford this. There's no way. He said, tell you what we'll do. You can be a graduate teaching assistant, teach 4 tennis classes and a basketball class each semester. We'll waive your tuition and pay you $600 a month. It's still the best job I ever had. Okay. So I signed up right then and I told Ohio U, thanks for the interview opportunity, but I'm going to take the sure thing and pass on that. So that's how I got to athletic admin and got to LA. And then sure enough, it was a wonderful experience. Chairman of the PE department was a legendary physical education administrator, a guy named Jay Tillman Hall. Tilly took a liking to me too. I played golf. We would go to this little public course over by LAX and the planes flying over all the time. And we'd play golf, a couple times a month, and got to work in the athletic department there. And then fortunately, the Williams Fund job opened up at KU and Bob Frederick was hired. He was looking for an assistant. And so I came back and interviewed during the Kansas relays. And we had just at USC had the USC John Robinson, who was the football coach, fundraising golf tournament. And it was at John Wayne's Country Club in Newport Beach. Yeah. So, I mean, it was big time and all this. Bob Frederick didn't play golf. And 2 weeks from that, after that interview, Bob was going to run the Jayhawk Golf Classic. And Bob wasn't a golfer, didn't know anything about it. My interview for the Williams Fund job consisted of me telling Bob how we ran the golf tournament at USC. And that's how I got the job. I had that little bit of knowledge and expertise, and the timing was right, and we hit it off. And so that's how I got into it, and that's kind of the story. A long answer to your question, but it's just how things fall into place and timing and having a little bit of knowledge in a particular area, and it all worked out.
That's amazing. God's plan is amazing. How he does things. He puts you in the right place at the right time. Put you where you're supposed to be. It's just amazing. What a great story.
Well, thanks.
Well, listen, we're going to take a short break, Richard, and
okay.
When we come back, what I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about KU and maybe some of your favorite coaches.
Sure.
And we can talk about what your responsibilities were and things like that too. But
sure.
It'd be interesting for me to know, your perspective on some of the coaches that are there, because all of them have always been famous. When I was in Ohio growing up, I knew of Bob Simmons, and I wasn't a track guy. I was a basketball kid, but I knew of Jim Ryan and Bob Simmons and, Ted Owens and et cetera. So we'll do that when we come back.
Okay, great.
Thanks.